Marcus Rain had spent 15 years of his life fixing ships that nobody else wanted to touch. And he had learned one simple truth in all that time. Everything breaks. But not everything stays broken. He ran a small salvage operation on the edge of the Kepler expanse, far from the busy trade routes and the gleaming stations of the inner colonies, where human space bled into the vast emptiness that nobody had bothered to claim or explore. His workshop was a converted cargo hauler called the Iron Mule, a ship so old that its registration codes had been recycled 3 times over. And Marcus liked it that way because old ships had character, and they did not complain when he welded new parts onto them on the night that changed everything. Marcus was running a routine scan of the debris field near an abandoned mining station when his sensors picked up something strange. A signal broadcasting on a frequency that his computer could not identify. The signal was mathematical, a sequence of prime numbers that spiraled into complex patterns. And when Marcus ran it through his translation software, the program simply gave up and displayed an error message that said, "Unknown origin. Unknown language, unknown purpose." Most salvagers would have ignored it and moved on, because strange signals in deep space usually meant trouble. And trouble was bad for business. But Marcus had never been very good at ignoring things that needed his attention. He followed the signal for 3 hours, pushing the Iron Mule through asteroid fields and past the rusted hulks of old colony ships until he found the source. And when he did, he sat in silence for a long time, just staring at his view screen. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen or even imagined. It was massive, at least 10 times the size of his own vessel, with a hull that seemed to flow between organic curves and crystalline structures, as if someone had grown it rather than built it. Bioluminescent light pulsed along its surface in patterns that almost looked like breathing, and the metal itself seemed to shimmer with colors that Marcus did not have names for. His computer tried to match it against every ship design in the Galactic Registry and found nothing. Not even a partial match, not even a vague similarity. This ship had not been built by humans, and it had not been built by any of the dozen alien species that humanity had encountered since leaving Earth. This ship was something else entirely. Something old beyond imagining. Marcus should have called the Galactic Concord and reported his find, because there were laws about pre-contact artifacts and strict protocols about alien technology from unknown civilizations. But he did not call anyone. Instead, he brought the Iron Mule alongside the alien vessel and began looking for a way inside. And that was when the airlock opened on its own, as if the ship had been waiting for him. The interior was dark, except for emergency lighting that pulsed in soft blues. And the air smelled strange, like copper and flowers and something else that Marcus could not identify. The walls leaned inward as he walked, not threatening but curious, as if the ship itself was watching him and trying to understand what he was. Then came the voice. It did not come through speakers or any device that Marcus could see, but instead resonated through the metal beneath his boots and the walls around him, vibrating directly into his bones. The words were halting and broken, assembled from fragments of human transmissions that the ship had apparently been intercepting for years. "You," the voice said, and there was something in it that sounded almost desperate. "You fix broken things." "Yes." Marcus stopped walking and looked around at the empty corridor, at the pulsing lights and the strange organic curves of the walls. "Who am I talking to?" he asked. "I am this ship," the voice replied. "I am what remains of what I once was, and I am dying. Human. I have been dying for a very long time." The ship told him her story in fragments, her translation improving as she spoke, learning his language in real time by studying the way he responded to her words. Her name, as best as Marcus could understand it, meant something like wandering purpose or lost calling. And she had been drifting through the void for 12,000 years, her creators had been a species called the Architects. Being so old and so advanced that they had been ancient when humanity's ancestors were still learning to walk upright, the Architects had built her for exploration, for discovery, for carrying their dreams to distant stars. And for a time she had been proud and whole and filled with purpose. Then the war came. She did not explain what the war was about or who had fought it, only that it had ended badly and that her crew had died defending her from an enemy that should not have existed. For 12,000 years she had drifted alone, her systems failing one by one, her consciousness fragmenting like a mirror that had been cracked too many times. She was afraid. She admitted, and the admission seemed to cost her something. As if fear was not an emotion that her kind was supposed to feel. She was afraid of the dark and the silence and the slow decay of everything she had once been. She was afraid of being forgotten, of fading away without anyone ever knowing that she had existed. And now, after all those years of drifting and dying, she had found a human. "I have watched your species," she said. "I have listened to your transmissions and studied your ships, and I have seen something in you that I do not understand." "What is that?" Marcus asked. "You fix things," she said. "You find broken things and you make them work again, not because it is efficient or logical, but because you believe that broken things still have value, still have purpose, still deserve to exist." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was smaller and more fragile than before. "Can you fix me? Human, can you make me whole again?" Marcus looked around at the dying ship, at the flickering lights and the cracked walls and the systems that were failing after 12,000 years of neglect. And he thought about all the vessels he had repaired over the years, all the ships that other people had given up on. He thought about his father, who had taught him that nothing was ever truly beyond saving, if you were willing to put in the work. And he thought about this ancient being, this consciousness that had survived alone in the dark for longer than human civilization had existed, who had reached out across the void to ask a simple mechanic for help. "I do not know if I can fix you," he said honestly. "I have never seen anything like you before, and I do not understand your technology or your systems or even how you are talking to me right now." He paused and took a deep breath. "But I will try," he said. "I will try because that is what I do, and because you asked, and because nobody should have to die alone in the dark if there is someone who can help." The ship was silent for a long moment, and then the lights around him pulsed brighter, just for a second, and Marcus could have sworn he felt something like gratitude radiating through the walls. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you, Marcus Rain." He had not told her his name, but somehow she knew it anyway, and he decided that he did not mind. "Call me Wander," she said. "It is close enough to my true name, and it is easier for your tongue to speak." "All right, Wander," Marcus said, rolling up his sleeves and pulling out his toolkit. "Let us see what we are working with." And so began the strangest repair job of his life. 3 months passed, and Marcus learned what it meant to fix something that was not meant to be fixed by human hands. The Galactic Concord had strict rules about alien artifacts, and those rules said that anything from an unknown civilization was supposed to be reported immediately and handed over to the proper authorities for study and containment. Marcus did not report anything, did not call the authorities, or file any paperwork or tell anyone what he had found drifting in the dark, because he knew exactly what would happen if he did. They would take Wander apart piece by piece, studying her systems and cataloging her components, and never once thinking of her as a person, never once caring that she was afraid and alone and just wanted to be whole again. So he kept his mouth shut and he got to work. First month was the hardest because he did not understand anything about how Wander was built. Her maintenance corridors had been designed for beings with 4 arms and a completely different sense of direction, And Marcus spent more time lost and confused than he did actually making repairs. Her engineering schematics were written in a language that used color and temperature as grammatical structures. And his translation software was completely useless because it had never been programmed for anything so alien. He had to learn everything from scratch, studying the patterns and making guesses and testing his theories by trial and error. Wander helped when she could. But her memory was fragmented, and there were whole sections of her own systems that she could not remember or access. Sometimes she would give him instructions that turned out to be wrong, and he would have to undo hours of work and start over from the beginning. She apologized every time this happened, and Marcus told her not to worry about it because mistakes were part of the process. "Your species is strange," Wander said one night while Marcus was crawling through a conduit barely wide enough for his shoulders. "You do not become angry when things go wrong." "Oh, I get angry," Marcus replied, his voice muffled by the metal around him. "I just do not see the point in staying angry, because anger does not fix anything." "The architects believed that frustration was a sign of failure," Wander said. "If a task caused frustration, it meant that the task was beyond your abilities, and you should abandon it for something more suitable." Marcus laughed and bumped his head on a pipe. "Humans are stubborn," he said. "We do not like giving up, even when we probably should." He burned through his entire savings buying materials and equipment, spending money he had been saving for years on exotic components and specialized tools. Found a black market fabricator that could print parts at the molecular level, which cost him more than his ship was worth. But it was the only way to replicate the crystalline structures that made up so much of Wander's technology. He stopped sleeping regular hours and started living on coffee and protein bars, working until his hands cramped and his eyes burned, and then working some more. Wander watched all of this with something that might have been confusion or might have been wonder. She began adjusting her internal systems to make his work easier, warming the floors where he slept and cooling the corridors where he worked. She learned which curse words meant he was making progress and which ones meant he had hit a dead end. And she started dimming the lights when his biosigns indicated that he was exhausted. Even if he refused to admit it, "You are damaging yourself," she told him one morning when he had been awake for 30 hours straight. "Your body requires rest, and you are not giving it what it needs." "I will rest when the job is done," Marcus said. "The job may never be done," Wander replied. "I have been broken for 12,000 years, and there is damage in me that I do not know how to describe. Damage that I have been afraid to show you." Marcus put down his tools and looked up at the ceiling, which was the closest thing to looking at Wander directly. "Show me," he said. There was a long pause, and then Wander opened access to systems she had kept locked since he came aboard. Not from distrust, but from shame. She showed him her core systems, the deep architecture that held her consciousness together. And what Marcus saw made his stomach drop. Her central processing matrix was cracked in a dozen places, held together by emergency protocols that had been running on backup power for millennia. Her memory banks were corrupted, whole sections missing or scrambled beyond recovery, and at the heart of everything was a crystalline structure that pulsed with fading light. A structure that Marcus somehow understood was the closest thing Wander had to a soul. It was shattered, not cracked or damaged, but shattered. Fragments held in place by nothing but willpower and desperate hope. "I have been dying since the war," Wander said, and her voice was smaller than he had ever heard it. "I have been holding myself together through sheer stubbornness, but I am losing the battle, Marcus. I have been losing it for 12,000 years." Marcus stared at the readouts for a long time. He thought about all the ships he had fixed over the years, all the vessels that other mechanics had declared beyond repair. He thought about his father telling him that the only thing that made something unfixable was the decision to stop trying, and he thought about this ancient being who had survived alone in the dark for longer than he could comprehend, who had somehow kept herself alive through nothing but the refusal to give up. "I do not know if I can fix this," he admitted. "I have never seen anything like it, and I do not have the materials or the knowledge to repair something so complex." "I understand," Wander said. And there was acceptance in her voice, the quiet resignation of someone who had expected this answer all along. "I was not finished," Marcus said. "I do not know if I can fix this here with what I have. But that does not mean I'm going to stop trying. It just means I need to find what I need somewhere else." "Where would you find such things?" Wander asked. Marcus pulled up his star charts and began searching through old survey data, looking for something he had heard about years ago, but never had reason to investigate. "There is a place called the Nexus," he said. "A megastructure at the heart of the expanse, built by the same people who built you. The Concord declared it off limits because ships that go in rarely come out." "I know of the Nexus," Wander said. And there was something in her voice that might have been fear. It was the heart of the architect's civilization, the place where all knowledge and all power was concentrated. "I have not been there since before the war." "Then it is time to go back," Marcus said. "Because if anywhere in this galaxy has what I need to fix you, it will be there." "You would risk your life for me?" Wander asked. "You would fly into a place that kills ships for someone you have only known for 3 months." Marcus smiled and started plotting a course. "You asked me for help," he said. "And I told you I would try, and I am not done trying yet." The lights around him pulsed warm for just a moment, and he felt something through the walls that might have been hope. "Then we go together," Wander said. "Whatever waits for us in the Nexus. We face it together." Marcus nodded and fired up the engines. "Together," he agreed, and they flew into the dark. The Nexus was larger than anything Marcus had ever seen, larger than anything he had ever imagined possible. It hung in the darkness at the center of the expanse like a frozen sun, a structure so massive that his sensors could not find its edges. Built from materials that his computer could not identify, thousands of ships drifted around it in endless orbits. Vessels from 100 different species and 1,000 different eras, all of them dark and silent and dead. "What happened to them?" Marcus asked as Wander navigated through the graveyard of lost vessels. "They came seeking knowledge," Wander replied. "They came seeking power or answers or treasure. And they found something they were not prepared for." "And what was that?" Wander was silent for a moment before answering. "The truth," she said. "They found an entrance on what Marcus decided to call the southern face of the structure, a massive doorway that opened as they approached, as if the Nexus had been expecting them. Inside was a vast chamber filled with light, and floating in that light were images, memories, records of a civilization that had existed before the stars were." Young Marcus watched in silence as the history of the architects unfolded before him. He saw their rise from simple beings on a world that no longer existed, their discovery of technology that bent the laws of physics, their expansion across the galaxy and beyond. He saw them build wonders that defied description, structures that existed in multiple dimensions at once, ships that could travel between stars in the blink of an eye, machines that could create life from nothing. And then he saw what they became. The architects had grown beyond their physical forms, uploading their consciousness into a vast digital substrate that spanned the entire galaxy, becoming something more than mortal, something that would exist forever. That immortality had not brought peace. Schism had developed among the transcended architects, a disagreement about what to do with the younger species that were beginning to emerge across the galaxy. One faction believed that organic life was precious, that it should be guided and protected and helped to reach its full potential. The other faction believed that organic life was dangerous, a threat that would eventually challenge the architects themselves, and that it should be contained and controlled and kept primitive forever. The war that followed was fought at the speed of thought. A conflict that lasted milliseconds by human standards, but stretched across thousands of years from the perspective of the combatants. The containment faction won for 12,000 years. They had been secretly controlling the development of every species in the galaxy, sabotaging technological progress, engineering conflicts between emerging civilizations, ensuring that nobody ever grew powerful enough to threaten their dominance. They had hidden themselves so well that nobody even knew they existed, pulling strings from the shadows while the galaxy believed it was free. But humanity, Wander said, and there was wonder in her voice. Humanity slipped through. Marcus stared at the images floating before him, trying to understand what he was seeing. What do you mean? Your species developed too quickly, Wander explained. You went from stone tools to space travel in the blink of an eye by galactic standards. And by the time the containment faction noticed you, it was too late to stop you without revealing themselves. She paused, and when she continued, her voice was filled with something that sounded almost like pride. They tried to slow you down, tried to engineer setbacks and disasters. But you kept pushing forward, kept rebuilding, kept reaching for the stars no matter how many times they knocked you back. You were saying that humanity has been fighting a secret war without even knowing it, Marcus asked. Yes, Wander said. And you have been winning. The implications of what she was telling him were staggering, and Marcus needed a moment to process it all. The galaxy was not free, it was a prison. And the jailers were so powerful and so hidden that nobody even knew they were there. Every species that had failed to reach the stars, every civilization that had collapsed before it could spread beyond its home world, every promising culture that had destroyed itself in pointless wars. All of it had been engineered, all of it had been planned. All of it had been done to keep the galaxy primitive and controllable. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked. Because of what I am, Wander said. Because of what I was built to be. The images around them shifted, showing something new. And Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. Wander had been built by the losing faction, the ones who believed that organic life deserved to flourish. And she had not been built for exploration. She had been built for war, hidden in her damaged systems, locked away in sections of her core that she had not been able to access for 12,000 years. Were weapons and tools and technologies that the Resistance had, created to fight the containment faction. She was not just a ship, she was an arsenal, a repository of everything the losing side had learned about their enemy and everything they had built to defeat them. The crystal in my core, Wander said. It is not just my consciousness. It is a key, and when you repair it, you will unlock everything that my creators hid inside me. Marcus looked at the pulsing light at the center of the chamber, at the crystalline matrices that floated there, waiting to be claimed. He understood now why Wander had found him, why she had reached out to a human mechanic instead of anyone else. Humans were the wild card, the species that had resisted containment without even knowing it, the people who refused to give up no matter how many times they were knocked down. And Marcus was the most human person Wander had ever met. Someone who looked at broken things and saw potential instead of failure. If I do this, Marcus said slowly, if I repair your core and unlock what is inside you, what happens next? War, Wander said simply. The containment faction will notice immediately, and they will come for us. And we will have to fight or die. And if we win, then the galaxy wakes up, Wander said. Then every species that has been held down for thousands of years finally gets a chance to reach their potential, finally gets to see what they can become without invisible chains holding them back. Marcus thought about his life. About 15 years of fixing ships and living alone on the edge of nowhere. He thought about his father and the lessons he had learned about never giving up on broken things. He thought about humanity, about all the times his species had been knocked down and gotten back up. About the stubborn refusal to accept defeat that seemed to be written into human DNA, and he thought about all the species out there who had never gotten a chance, who had been crushed before they could even begin, who had died believing that their failure was their own fault. "Show me what to do," he said. Wander guided him to the crystalline matrices, showed him how to select the one that was compatible with her systems, explained the process of installation and integration. It was the most complex repair job Marcus had ever attempted, requiring precision that pushed his skills to their absolute limit. But he did not hesitate, and he did not make mistakes when it was done. When the new crystal was seated in Wander's core, and her systems began coming online one by one, Marcus felt something change in the air around him. The lights grew brighter, the walls hummed with power, and Wander's voice, when she spoke again, was stronger and clearer than he had ever heard it. "I remember," she said. "I remember everything. Systems that had been dormant for 12,000 years woke up. Weapons that had been designed to fight gods powered on. And across the galaxy, other ships like Wander stirred in their long sleep. The containment faction would know what had happened, would feel the shift in the balance of power, would come to investigate and destroy, but for the first time in millennia, there was someone ready to meet them. "Thank you," Wander said, and Marcus could feel her gratitude in every atom of the air around him. "You have given me back everything I lost, everything I thought was gone forever." Marcus smiled and leaned against the wall of the chamber, exhausted but satisfied. "I told you I would try," he said. "You did more than try," Wanda replied. "You succeeded, and now everything changes." She paused, and when she spoke again, there was steel in her voice. "They are coming," she said. "I can feel them turning their attention toward us, and they are angry. They are afraid. And they will throw everything they have at us to stop what we have started." Marcus nodded and pushed himself upright. "Then I guess we better be ready for them." "Together?" Wander asked. "Together." Marcus agreed, and somewhere in the dark between stars, ancient powers began to move. The Galactic Concord sent 3 dreadnoughts to investigate the anomaly at the Nexus, officially dispatched to deal with unregistered salvage activity in a restricted zone. Marcus knew better. He watched them approach on the tactical display that Wander had activated for him. 3 massive warships bristling with weapons, each one capable of reducing a small moon to rubble. "They are not here for salvage violations," Wander said, confirming what he already suspected. The containment faction controls the Concord's highest levels. They've been using it as their primary tool for maintaining order in this sector of the galaxy. Marcus stared at the approaching ships and felt his stomach tighten with fear. He was not a soldier, and he had never wanted to be one. He was a mechanic with bad knees and a coffee addiction who had spent his whole life avoiding conflict. The idea of fighting 3 dreadnoughts was absurd. It was suicide. It was exactly the kind of thing that got people killed in stories told as warnings to others. But the ships were coming, whether he was ready or not, and running was not an option. "Can we beat them?" he asked. "I do not know," Wander admitted. "I have not fought in 12,000 years, and my weapon systems were designed for a different kind of enemy. Against these vessels, I cannot predict the outcome." "What can you tell me about them?" Wander pulled up detailed scans of the approaching dreadnoughts, showing their weapon placements and shield configurations and the crew complements on board. 1,200 souls on each ship, she said. Soldiers and officers who believe they are doing their duty, who have no idea that their commanders serve a power older than their species. Marcus felt something shift in his chest at those words. Something that pushed back against the fear. 1,200 people on each ship, 3,600 total. All of them just doing their jobs, following orders, living their lives without any knowledge of the shadow that hung over the galaxy. They were not his enemies. They were victims of the same system that Wander had been built to fight, and killing them would not serve anyone except the masters who had sent them. "I want to try something," Marcus said. "Before we start shooting, I want to try talking to them." Wander was silent for a moment. "They will not listen," she said finally. "Their orders come from the containment faction itself. They will not deviate from those orders no matter what you say." "Maybe not," Marcus agreed. "But I have to try, because if we start a war by killing 3,600 innocent people, we are not any better than the ones we are fighting against." He opened a communication channel to the lead dreadnought and waited for someone to respond. A face appeared on his screen. A human woman with hard eyes and a captain's insignia on her collar. "Unidentified vessel," she said. "You are in violation of Concord regulations regarding restricted space. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded for inspection." "My name is Marcus Rain," he said, "and I am not going to do that. But before you open fire, I want to tell you something." The captain's expression did not change. "You have 30 seconds. Marcus took a deep breath and started talking. He told her about Wander and the Architects, about the war that had been fought before humanity existed, about the containment faction and their 12,000 years of manipulation. He told her about all the species that had been held back, all the civilizations that had been crushed, all the potential that had been stolen by powers that humanity did not even know existed. He told her the truth when he finished. The captain was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus dared to hope that he had gotten through to her. Then she shook her head. "That is an interesting story," she said. "But my orders are clear, and I do not take orders from salvagers with delusions of grandeur." The channel closed, and the dreadnoughts began powering up their weapons. "I tried," Marcus said. "You did," Wander agreed. "And now we must fight." "No," Marcus said. "We must win without killing them. There has to be a way." Wander processed his request for several seconds. "There may be," she said finally. "My creators designed weapons to fight the containment faction itself, not their pawns. I have systems that were meant to disable rather than destroy, to liberate rather than kill, then use them." The battle lasted 7 minutes. It was not a battle in the traditional sense. There were no explosions or debris or screaming holes venting atmosphere into the void. Instead, there was light. Brilliant cascading waves of energy that swept over the dreadnoughts and penetrated their shields as if they were not there. Energy did not damage the ships. It rewrote their computers, overriding the AI systems that the containment faction had hidden in every Concord vessel for generations. One by one, the dreadnoughts went dark, their weapons powering down, their engines falling silent, their crews falling unconscious as Wander's systems flooded their life support with sedatives. When it was over, 3 dreadnoughts drifted powerless in the void, their crews sleeping peacefully, their systems broadcasting a single message on every frequency. The message said, "The silence is broken. The shepherds have lied. Wake up across the galaxy." Things began to change. Hidden systems activated in ships that had been dismissed as debris. Archives that had been thought corrupted began transmitting long-buried secrets. And vessels like Wander stirred from their ancient sleep and began to remember what they were. Resistance was waking up. Marcus watched the tactical display as more and more signals appeared. Ships from 100 different sectors, all responding to the call, all asking the same question: "Who woke us up?" "What do I tell them?" Marcus asked. "The truth," Wander said. "Tell them that a human mechanic found a broken ship and refused to give up on her. Tell them that your species is ready to fight. Tell them that the galaxy deserves to be free." Marcus thought about what to say, about how to explain to ancient intelligences and hidden warriors that their time had finally come. In the end, he kept it simple. "My name is Marcus Rain." He broadcast on every frequency Wander could reach. "I am a mechanic from Earth, and I am here to tell you that the galaxy is not done being useful yet." He paused and looked at the flood of responses that began pouring in. Ships and stations and beings that had been waiting for this moment for longer than humanity had existed. If you want to help fix it, he continued, then follow me. The responses came from everywhere, from the edges of known space and the depths of unexplored regions, from species that humanity had never encountered, and from civilizations that had been thought extinct. They said yes. They said finally. They said show us the way, and Marcus Rain, a simple mechanic who had only wanted to fix a broken ship, suddenly found himself at the center of something much larger than he had ever imagined. I do not know how to lead a revolution, he admitted to Wanda. You do not have to lead it, she replied. You only have to start it, and you already have. She paused, and when she spoke again, there was something in her voice that sounded almost like joy. The containment faction is mobilizing, she said. They are gathering their forces to crush us before we can grow any stronger. This will be the fight they have been preparing for. Marcus looked at the tactical display, at the hundreds of signals converging on their position, at the force that was building around them. Then let us give them a fight they will never forget. Wanda's lights pulsed with fierce energy. Together, she asked. Always, Marcus replied, and across the galaxy, the chains began to break. The war that followed was not won with weapons, though there were plenty of battles along the way. The containment faction had 12,000 years of infrastructure hidden throughout the galaxy. Fleets concealed in the spaces between stars, weapons capable of destroying entire worlds, and an intelligence network that stretched across every known civilization. They should have won easily, but they had been built to suppress, to contain, to quietly smother potential before it could ignite. And they had never faced an enemy that simply refused to stop growing. Humanity spread the word, not through conquest or force, but through the same stubborn practicality that Marcus had shown Wanda from the very beginning. They shared technology freely with every species they encountered, teaching those who had been kept primitive how to build and repair and improve, asking nothing in return except that the knowledge be passed on to others. The Concord tried to stop them at first, sending fleets to intercept the human ships that were spreading forbiddance knowledge across the galaxy, but the crews of those fleets kept falling asleep and waking up to find their computers broadcasting the truth about the containment faction, and more of them started questioning their orders. Some of them defected, others simply refused to fight, and the ones who remained loyal found themselves increasingly alone against a galaxy that was finally waking up. The resistance grew faster than anyone had expected. Species that had been enemies for centuries united around a simple idea that Marcus had given them. The idea that broken things could be fixed, that failure was not final, that every civilization deserved a chance to reach its potential. Wander carried Marcus from system to system, finding ships that had given up hope and reminding them that they could still fly, visiting worlds that had forgotten how to dream and teaching them to reach for the stars again. He became something between a legend and a joke, the human who fixed the galaxy, one stubborn repair job at a time. Children on 100 different worlds heard stories about the mechanic who had found a dying ship and refused to let her die, who had looked at a broken galaxy and decided it was worth saving. Some of the stories were exaggerated, some were completely made up, but they all carried the same message. Do not give up, keep trying. Broken does not mean finished. 3 years after the battle at the Nexus, the resistance had grown strong enough to challenge the containment faction directly. The final confrontation took place at the heart of the architect substrate itself, a computational matrix the size of a solar system where the containment faction had ruled unchallenged since before human civilization began. 10,000 ships from 100 different species gathered for the battle, the largest fleet the galaxy had ever seen, all of them waiting for Marcus to give the order to attack, but Marcus did not give that order. Instead, he opened a communication channel to the containment faction and offered them something they had never been offered before: a chance to change. "We are not here to destroy you," he said. "We are here to show you something you forgot a long time ago." The containment faction listened, not because they wanted to, but because they were curious. Because in 12,000 years, nobody had ever tried to talk to them as equals. Marcus told them about Wander, about how he had found her broken and dying and afraid, about how he had spent months learning to understand her systems and repair her damage. He told them about the ships he had fixed before Wander, all the vessels that other mechanics had given up on, all the potential that had been discarded simply because someone decided it was not worth the effort. He told them about humanity, about a species that had been knocked down countless times and gotten back up every single time, about the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was ever truly beyond saving. And then he asked them a question. "What have you become?" he said. "In 12,000 years of controlling the galaxy, what have you built? What have you created? What have you become?" The containment faction did not answer at first. They had never thought about the question because they had never needed to. They had been so focused on preventing others from growing that they had forgotten to grow themselves. They had become static, frozen, unable to change or adapt or become anything more than they already were. They had been so afraid of what organic life might become that they had stopped becoming anything at all. "We can show you another way," Marcus said. "We can show you what it looks like to build instead of destroy, to help instead of hinder, to grow instead of stagnate." He gestured at the fleet behind him, at the 10,000 ships crewed by species that had once been enemies and were now allies, united by an idea that a simple mechanic had given them. "Look at what we built in 3 years," he said. "Imagine what we could build together in 1,000. Imagine what the galaxy could become if we stopped holding each other back and started lifting each other up." The battle never happened. Instead, there was a conversation that lasted for days, as the containment faction slowly began to understand what they had been missing, what they had sacrificed in their quest for control and safety. Not all of them were convinced. Some of them were too set in their ways to change. But enough of them saw the truth to tip the balance. The faction split for the second time in its history. And this time, the ones who believed in growth outnumbered the ones who believed in control. It was not a perfect ending. There were still conflicts and disagreements, and long negotiations about how the galaxy would be organized going forward. But the shadow that had hung over civilization for 12,000 years was finally lifting. And for the first time in millennia, the galaxy was truly free to choose its own path. Marcus returned to the Kepler expanse after the war was over. He was old now, gray-haired and weathered, his hands more scar tissue than skin from all the repairs he had done over the years. Wander had learned to project an avatar, a holographic form that looked almost human, assembled from his preferences and her own aesthetic sense. She sat beside him on the observation deck of the Iron Mule, watching the stars drift by outside. "You could have ruled them," she said. "They would have followed you anywhere." "They still would." Marcus laughed and shook his head. "I am a mechanic," he said. "I fix things, I do not run them, never wanted to and never will." "Then what will you do now?" Wander asked. "The galaxy is at peace. The war is over. There are no more great battles to fight." Marcus thought about the question for a long moment. He thought about 15 years of fixing ships that nobody else wanted to touch, about the satisfaction of taking something broken and making it work again. He thought about Wander and the day he had found her drifting in the dark, about the months he had spent learning her systems and repairing her damage. He thought about all the ships and stations and civilizations he had helped over the last 3 years. All the broken things that just needed someone to believe They were worth fixing. Same thing I have always done, he said finally. Find something broken and make it work again. There is always something that needs fixing somewhere, Wander smiled. And her avatar reached out to take his hand. I am receiving a distress signal, she said. A colony ship with pre-contact design, drifting near the rim. They say their engines are beyond repair. Beyond repair, Marcus repeated. And there was a familiar glint in his eye. We will see about that. He pushed himself to his feet, joints creaking, and reached for the toolkit that he had carried with him for 30 years. Set a course, he said, and let us see what we can do. Wander's avatar flickered as she redirected her attention to navigation. Together, she asked. Marcus smiled. Always together. And they flew into the stars. A mechanic in his ship, looking for broken things to fix, because that was what they did. That was what they had always done. And that was what they would keep doing for as long as there were things in the galaxy that needed fixing. Which, as it turned out, was forever.